Back in session. This is discussion, clerk's recommendation for fiscal year 2025 budget.
Do you want me to go first?
Right.
Do you want me to run through the bullet points, or do you want to? Either way.
It's your budget.
So this was, as you can guess, in the feeling around the county, this was a difficult year. There were a lot of heavy costs. We were able to approve and recommend a lot of the operational expenses that did not increase taxes. But there are a few things that cost us a little bit. So in this recommendation, last year was a great year because we were able to give raises and do a lot of things and not increase taxes. This does call for a 1% increase in tax and new construction. We were hoping that we could do something without any tax increase at all, but this is a tax ask. New construction and 1%. That being said, this does give, we adjusted the county salary schedule from 10 steps to 5. The schedule is now 15%. From steps 1 to 5, there's a 3% between 1 and 2, and 2 and 3. There's 4% between step 3 and 4, and a 5% step between 4 and 5. We moved employees to a new step across the board, so everyone is still on the schedule or on their schedule. The sheriffs readjusted their salary schedule, adjusting steps for certified positions and non-certified, kept the current scale. That was a cost. We adjusted the prosecuting attorney's salaries. That was a cost. A 3% COLA across the county. The salary schedule and non-certified law enforcement were included. The cost for remaining increases was almost $500,000 for that. The overall salary increases, $999,439. We budgeted at adult and juvenile probation positions for step increase when they pass post plus 1 year of service to be consistent with other law enforcement. The shift differential for landfill is budgeted. We eliminated vacant positions in IT, the prosecuting attorney's office, and D6, and Bannock County events. Let's see here. We shifted some court employees between clerk of the court and district court for transparency, so that all of the same like-kind employees were in the proper budget. But that doesn't have any cost. That's just for transparency. We added a temporary code enforcement officer in planning and development. And there are no new full-time positions added this year. Anyone that asks for a full-time, we've discussed it with all of those departments and talked with them, notably D6, which is an enterprise fund. They thought that they had the reserves and the funding to add a position, but they are actually, when we went through their numbers, they're barely skating by as it is, and we are borderline on subsidizing them at this point still. They are doing better, and hopefully
It was mostly because of the 2 new asks for FY24. They were a little more optimistic in revenue that those positions would generate, and that they would be completely self-sustaining. They're not quite at that point yet, so we can talk about that a little bit more as we go through the actual budget. But for highlight purposes, what Jason covered was appropriate.
Right. Any questions about that to this point?
No.
I know it's all just kind of a blur, and it's in the book, and we'll have to take some days to go through it. But do you want to go through operating? Okay, go ahead.
So for operating, we did increase the juvenile detention contribution by $18,000 is all, because of the 3% raise and so on. The event center contribution was, we were able to decrease that by $95,000 when compared to FY24, which is a positive. That means our revenues are going in the right direction. We did add a 4th of July contribution of $15,000. The budget for 4th of July is $125,000. That is in the Bannock County Events Fund because it's one of our funds that we facilitate. That budget is $125,000, but they can't quite bring in enough revenue to cover that, so Bannock County's got to subsidize it.
Let me ask you a question here. When you say the contribution increased, what does that mean exactly?
So with juvenile detention, all participating counties have to put in a portion based on a percentage calculation of usage. And when that budget goes up, potentially each county's contribution is going to go up as well. So that's.
So when there's a contribution increase, it costs us more money?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay.
And contribution may not be the appropriate term, but I'm not sure what to use, so that's what I use.
But the event center contribution decreased?
Yes, because we've subsidized basically the event center up here because they can't generate enough property taxes and other revenues to run the full operations. So the general fund has subsidized it. for the
But we're
last
going to
few years.
subsidize it less?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So they are going in the right direction.
Yes.
Okay.
We did, per discussion, we moved the Downey Ground events to the Bannock County Events Fund. The department had requested $14,000. We bounced that down to $5,000 with matching revenue. I didn't throw this in here, but we also moved the revenue for the events at the Coverall Building, the riding passes and those things. I moved that revenue into the fair maintenance budget because it should help subsidize that, the operations.
Mhm.
So I moved that. We did end up waiving fees for both Bannock County Events Fund and D6 due to funding constraints. Those are funds that are paid to the general fund to cover your costs, our costs, treasurer's costs, items like that. So we made the option to waive those this year to try and help them become a little more self-sufficient and then hopefully bring those back in next year. Those are enterprise funds, which is the only reason we charge admin fees. But if you want to be an enterprise fund, that's
the
what we
cost.
should
That's
have.
the cost, yeah.
We left health insurance at $9 million. We are using $1 million of reserves. We'll need to reassess maybe contribution rates by employees and maybe some other items with health insurance. But because we're in the middle of budget right now, we can't make those decisions that fast. So that'll be something we probably need to research through the FY25 budget.
Okay.
We implemented the fleet plan, less road and bridge. We cut back some of their vehicles. They had a lot of capital requests. And I mentioned to Kyle yesterday or the day before that with all of those asks, we just had to make a little bit of reduction. So he'll just adjust accordingly. The ambulance fund, we budgeted the contract per their request. We did reduce their capital, but hopefully they'll be getting some grants. And if they get the grants, they should be able to buy some of the items that we did cut out. If not, they'll just have to put it off for 2 years. Kind of a similar situation to what Roden Bridge dealt with is there was a lot of asks. We just needed to stretch it over a couple of years. And then we also did take out the South County McCammon Station startup that they wanted in there. We just don't have the funds to do so. That budget, we did take property taxes to the full amount that we could, and that was why we had to take out the McCammon operations.
He asked for how much on that McCammon, 600,000?
No, I think it was 6.
4?
I think it was 4.
Okay.
Four.
4.
And also, you're going to see a big reduction in bottom line because of the grants. We reduced, because we've spent ARPA monies, we reduced that by $5.8 million in grants. So bottom line looks, and actually, bottom line looks a lot better than it really should. This current year's budget is $103,997,000, and the clerk's recommendation is $101,208,000. But you gotta remember, we took out public defense. We had an extra pay period that affected things. So the A budget ask actually increased by about 650,000, and the benefits increased by about 328,000. That's distorted because we did have some of those funds that came out and automatically threw a decrease. So,
Okay.
overall, the, let's see. So yeah, that's the big reduction in operating was the grants, because we've spent those dollars. We've got about $8 million hopefully by the end of this fiscal year of ARPA monies that have been spent. So, a little bit of progress there. One thing I forgot to put on this sheet is we did put in 500,000 in PILT for, I can't remember what we labeled it, but basically it's for project overages, like the now 50,000 potentially for 6th Street, but also Matt gave me a quote for the furniture he's going to need for the YDC building. Porter's gave him a quote of 12,000. He thinks he could probably get it to about 5. So, and we can review that a little bit more as we go through the actual pages and all of the sheets. Overall funding, Jason touched on, but overall funding is the sheet that you guys have. So if you want to look at it, you can see property taxes on the back side. It shows what I'm projecting. Now granted, I don't have values yet, so I'm basing levy rates on last year's values. So for the county and road and bridge, that's going to go up just a little bit. Ambulance is going to go up, and abatement, depending on values, should hold the line because I used the same amount of property taxes for them this year. Overall, I'm projecting an increase of $8.54 per taxable 100,000. So even though there's a little bit of an increase, it's really not double digits. And if I get values and they're higher, which I'm optimistic for, that number will go down.
So you're using last year's values for these, but
Yes.
I thought Anita had told us that this year's values are softening up a little bit. Am I thinking the wrong thing?
Well, I think when she, yes, that's true. Softening, not increasing, but they're
Yes.
not really decreasing.
Okay.
Values are still holding the line.
Okay, all
Which
But
is
right.
why I based
they're
it that
just
way.
not skyrocketing
Yeah.
like they have been.
Okay.
And commercial values have gone up.
Correct.
And
correct.
so any increases in commercial and decreases in any other categories hopefully will
Offset a
at
little
least
bit.
offset. So that was why I was comfortable using same numbers.
Okay, that was kind of where I was going, is were you comfortable with that, or do you
Yeah.
think it should have been a little bit
We
more
was
aggressive?
actually low in 4 categories
Right.
this year in their assessed values, or last year, so that we had to bring up. And so if we come up to where we should be in them 4 categories,
So hopefully
should be good.
I will have values next week, and then that way when we start budget meetings with you guys on the 22nd, I will have final values so that maybe
A
I
little bit.
we can solidify those up a little bit. For other revenues, I did take some increases after I took the reduction of the grants. We've got about $2 million more in revenue. Part of that is because we've got some more consistent numbers on road and bridge. So highway users, the TECA money, those kinds of things, I've taken those up a little bit. I took revenue sharing up a little bit. I took liquor money up a little bit. This year we are budgeting money, for liquor money in junior college because we've used all of the reserves we had. The other places we had to take increases was liability insurance, and that we really didn't have an option for. But I did try to keep the property tax to a minimum, but I also, with the other revenues, I tried to take what I could up. We may beat revenue in excess sales tax, but I learned my lesson in '08, and I don't usually take those numbers up, because the minute you do, they don't come in. So,
And have you heard anything from the state since the first,
since our Spring Institute, no.
well, but their numbers were lower
Mhm.
on taxes and everything And I haven't heard the final since the 1st of July when their new budget year
Yeah,
started. So
I haven't heard.
haven't heard where their projection of monies are
Yeah,
either.
I haven't heard anything on that. And reserves, we're using about the same amount. The one thing I think we need to work through on the clerk's recommendation, or the commission proposed, is communications to the public. We need to remind them that the ATR tax credit is gone. That will impact citizens' taxes, but not to our fault. We are still asking for the same dollar amount. They just don't have that credit coming from the state. And because we don't have final dollars, we don't know what the HTR is going to be, the homeowner's tax relief.
We're going to blame it all on the treasurer anyway.
So-
She isn't here.
Those two items we might want to communicate through the process, just simply so citizens realize those were credits, one-time credits, or potentially one-time credits that they received this fiscal year that we won't have next year. And so an increase is going to be inevitable, but not for our,
Not for our
because
lack of
us.
trying.
Yes.
I mean,
So-
that's the key. We still have to function,
Right.
and I appreciate all of your work right here. I mean, I know this has been a tough one, and if we can hold at 1% instead of 3%, I mean, that's impressive.
Well-
To me, that's amazing.
So, yeah, it's 1% plus the new construction. The new construction is just the growth that we've had.
Yep.
And so,
Growth should be justified.
growth is justified.
Well, and if we wasn't so serious about this budget, it'd be 3% plus new construction. I mean, that's the honest truth. If we weren't so serious about how to do this budget, that's what it would be. And so I commend you on what you've done. I mean, we're gonna look through it all and see where we actually end up, but
Departments were really good when we reached out to them and told them, hey, you can't fund that position, or you can't have all your trucks.
And the sheriff's office worked extremely hard with the first salary option that they provided us was just too much. And they went back and spent 2 days, if not more, trying to bring that back down a little bit to what we could actually fund. So big kudos to those guys, because they did a lot of heavy lifting on that. I scared Tony a little bit earlier in the hallway and made him think he didn't get anything. But,
You threw something in at the last minute?
so, but we'll send out budget sheets to departments now, and provide them with notice if they want to come back before the board and make any requests that we would need to do that on the week of the 22nd. I know Christy talked to me and asked if we would need the last week of July. I told her we would need to wait and see how this meeting went, and then also we'll probably need to see what department feedback is to determine if or how many people may come in.
she talked to
And
me
ask for
yesterday
some more
about that
changes.
too.
So,
No, I mean, like I say, pretty commendable.
I'm sure there's a few adjustments you might want to make, but
Right.
We'll go over it again. That's what we do. And then meet and have conversations and, like I say, see which departments want to come and have conversations with us.
we'll try and have them come on the front end.
Yeah.
Because like always, it's easier to adjust for those at the beginning, because the closer you get to the deadline of having to publish, then you've got to find money or find other cuts. So
Well, I just shouldn't have it up front when we talk to anybody.
we'll
Get-
ask
get
them
it-
to
get
meet
it
then
done.
on Monday, Tuesday, the days that are already scheduled.
When are you back?
I'll be back next Wednesday, I think.
So,
I think that's why we planned the 22nd.
yeah, yeah. Just wanted to make sure, because I want him there.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
And I tried to accommodate around makeup.
Okay. Anything else on the budget?
Don't, unless you have any other questions. We're going to be digging through it some more here in the next couple weeks, so.
Yep, we'll review. But like I say, thank you All right. Let's go ahead and go back to the discussion on funding for opioid funds.
I'm not really sure what this part of the meeting is. I know I did an update to the board 2 weeks ago, and I've been busy with budget and financials, so I haven't done any follow-up.
I think we just scheduled to see if there was any movement and if you had looked at what the expended dollar amount had been. And I think we had talked about the sheriff's office using most of the opioid funds
Yes.
up to this point, but we were gonna just look to see who else has, other than Jared, used them. And I don't,
I thought that part of this was if there was anything in the budget that we needed to make sure that we had that money in there or didn't, or,
So we did budget, I believe, 250,000, I can't remember, for opioid for next year. I did talk to Brian yesterday, because part of the monies that come in, we need to obligate funds to potentially pay the attorney that is representing us, Keller Linkner. They could potentially ask for 33% plus costs for any monies they bring in that are defined by these pharmacies. Brian had a recommendation that maybe we earmark some of those funds and have them non-spendable until we know for sure if we're gonna have to pay any of those dollars out. So maybe what I'll do is, I did not do that because that was yesterday. Maybe through the commission proposed, we can add a separate line and just put potential attorney costs and define those down into their own line items so that they can't be spent by any other request.
and then the other thing that we talked a little bit about is when the, City of Hope or whatever they're called, they are not eligible for opioid funds. And,
Hope
just-
South.
Hope South. So we was all clear on that, and we didn't budget anything towards that.
We did not.
No.
Okay. I'm talking about the budget, one other thing, the dollars that we got from the state and forensic, is that included anywhere
No.
in this?
No, last I had talked to Braden, the ask was to get those funds spent this year so that that doesn't continue to roll over as zero operations in the financials, since that project is, I thought, done.
Well, maybe not. So I can have you an answer on that in a couple of weeks, but can you pencil it in right now with the remaining funds that are sitting there?
Let's make that a discussion for the Monday when we start budget.
Okay.
Is you'll have to add that in, and then you'll just have to tell me how, if it's not dead.
Okay.
Okay. I just, some of the things that are going through my mind right now, making sure that we have discussions about them and
Okay.
where we need to be.
I was hoping to have an answer for you yesterday, but the person I was supposed to meet with had to cancel, so.
All right.
Anything else on, I can, now that one phase of budget is done, I can try and send an email and work with Braden on, to other departments and see if there's any other opioid purposes that we want to try and start spending money on. Tony's aware of some of the items, but maybe he can think on some additional options. And then,
And we did that last year. And
We
I think
did.
the sheriff was the only one that really had any feedback.
I think ambulance district had some potential ideas that he might want to revisit. Bouncing back to budget, I did talk to Ryan, this probably could wait, but it's on my mind. We're supposed to get those GEMT monies. They still don't have firm dollar amounts. He was wondering if we got those dollar amounts, could we use that money potentially for McCammon? And I said, if we get them in October, yes, after we see how revenues come in. But if we get them in September, unless it's built into the budget, no. But those dollar amounts have now changed. I mean, they're saying 250,000, they're saying 30,000, they're saying 3,000. They just don't know what that dollar amount is. So to count on those funds for anything is just unrealistic at this point, in my opinion. wait and see on that. But he might have some opioid, bringing that back around,
Okay.
some opioid needs.
All right. Anything else? That being said.